In this video, we're going to take a look at the vSphere client. Now, if you've never, if you are already familiar with this, then please move on to the next video. If not, we're going to walk through just kind of a high-level overview of what, an introduction to the user interface. Because if you are new to VMware or have never worked with the vSphere client before, this is typically where you land when you first log in. So now I'm going to show you guys how to maneuver around and how to interpret some of the things you're seeing. So first thing we're going to do is click on the inventory tab here, and this is where you're brought to. Now VMware is actually pretty good about a lot of things, and they have a lot of getting started pages because they have to assume that you don't know what you're doing. So they're going to walk you through, like how to create a new virtual machine. So you click on that, and then it'll walk you through the step-by-step process of what to do. That's pretty straightforward, but I'm an advanced user, so I'm going to disable this, and I'm going to walk you through how all this stuff works. So if you go to the edit and you go to client settings and you say show getting started tabs and click on OK, that guy goes away. So now we are on the landing page. This is where all of my vSphere clients land. And the reason for that is because I don't need to be walked through how any of this stuff works. So basically what we have now is the landing page that you are more concerned about. This is going to give you more general information, the platform capabilities. Excuse me. And then when the next step here that we're going to take a look at is going to be understanding what you're looking at. So obviously general is going to be the general attributes of the physical server. What's available, what's not available, etc. Commands, we can go in here, we can create a new virtual machine, a new resource pool. We can put the host into maintenance mode if we need to do things to it. We can reboot it, and we can shut it down from here. So if you don't have access to the DCUI directly, I can reboot the host from vSphere, assuming that you can get into vSphere. Now, there's a common misconception that vSphere is the management UI, okay? And ESXi is the hypervisor. The hypervisor gets installed on the host, whatever the physical platform is. You install it, you give it some basic IP information so that you can reach that host from vSphere, and then any communication between the vSphere client and the host is over HTTPS. So it's going to be encrypted traffic back and forth. There's going to be some messages that are embedded inside of that HTTPS connection, or basically that SSL tunnel, and that's going to be how you communicate back and forth. So we have the summary tab. The next tab over here we have is virtual machines. We don't have any virtual machines deployed, but if we did, this is what it would look like. And to give you an idea of what that looks like, grab this guy real quick. So this is a one of my hosts. So we click on this guy here, go to the summary tab. This is what's going on. Now here I have, this is in an IBM system. So we have IBM systems. It's telling me the CPU, it's in evaluation mode, and I've got 17 days before I have to relicense or I have to reinstall. And then this host is managed by vCenter Server at 10.255.1.246, and these are all the port groups that I have. I have some storage that I've got associated to this, and there's approximately 64 gigs of RAM installed. If I go to virtual machines, I have a bunch of VMs. So right now these are going to be how you would look at how these guys are set up. So I have some VMs in here that are being pretty heavily used. I have to go to the VM level and see resource allocation on a per VM basis and see what's going on to see why this guy's not responding or something along those lines. But this is going to be CPU and there's going to be the memory allocation for each VM, and then we have storage, how much storage is being utilized by each VM. If we go to performance, this is going to give you an idea of how each one is doing. If I wanted to come in here and I wanted to switch to CPU, it would give me the CPU output, and so on and so forth. So you can get some general breakdown to say, okay, well, how much is the memory, how much memory is being used, and stuff like that. So it gives you some basic understanding of operationally what's going on, and it gives you this fluctuation. It's kind of like a line graph to let you know what's going on. From a configuration standpoint, this is where you're going to do everything with the client. So starting from the top, you have the health status, which there's an alert, and the alert is, I believe this is going to be a power issue, and it is. I don't have a, basically all this says is I've only got one plug plugged into the host. I have 2 ports, I'm only utilizing one port. So that's why you see that popping up there. Processors, it gives you a lot of information as to what's going on processor-wise, but everything's normal from that perspective. Come down here to the processors. It tells me the processor version that I have, and all that good stuff. I go to memory. It says that I have 64 gigs of memory used. The system is using 320 megs, and the virtual machines can use 65.2 gigs, or roughly it can use like 63.5 gigabytes of the 64 available. Go down to storage. I have a number of data stores, and this is basically just hard drives. So I have the local disk. This is the installed drive on the computer, which is a 60 gig drive, which I believe is a 10,000 RPM SAS drive, serial attached storage, and it's like 60 or 72 gigs. So they come in various sizes, 72, 146, etc. And I chose to buy a single 72 gig drive, install it, and then plunk it down. That's basically how this comes into play. If we go to networking, this is where all my networking comes into play. This is how I'm able, in all the other videos that I do, how I'm able to separate things and make networking possible between hosts and different virtual machines. I can take a Windows 7 PC, like PC1 for instance. I could take him, put one of his network adapters into a vSwitch that communicates with the virtual router, and that virtual router will give that PC on that network adapter an IP address. And a lot of the security videos you've seen lately, that's how I've been doing it. Now I've gone through some pretty heavy explanations as to how I've actually pulled that off, but that's basically how that comes into play. So you have your add networking, you have your properties tab here, so you can go in there and manipulate a few things, so on and so forth. I'm going to be doing a networking video specifically, and we're going to walk ourselves through how a lot of that stuff comes into play. But basically, these are all the vSwitches that I've got going on right now, and we see that all 3 hosts here in OpenFiler are in the same vSwitch, which allows OpenFiler to allow host 1, 2, and 3 to view OpenFiler storage, so that these 3 hosts can leverage shared storage. vMotion is the same concept. I have to us hosts 1, 2, and 3 are in the vMotion vSwitch, so I should be able to vMotion between the hosts that way. If we click on storage adapters, you get your iSCSI adapter, which is a software adapter. Then you have several physical adapters, and these are doing things for the different HBAs or host bus adapters. And then when you have the iSCSI software adapter, the next thing you have is you have to configure it. So you have to tell it, in order for this to work and for the storage to be seen, you actually have to map the adapter to a physical switch, or to a vSwitch. And that switch is right here. Let's scroll down a little bit. This standard switch, vSwitch 1, is SAN, and I gave it an IP address of 10.1.2.52, which I have a Windows 7 PC running StarWind software, which is my StarWind vSAN for vSphere, which is acting as an iSCSI target, and I simply configure this guy with an IP address and map it to a network adapter, a gigabit network adapter, and then all I have to do from the storage adapters is go in and assign. I have to map the iSCSI software adapter to vSwitch1, and then once I've mapped it, I give it an IP address and told the physical host, in this case here .52, if you want storage, you have to point to 10.1.2.150, which is the IP address of the target, and point it to 3260, which is the iSCSI port, and then which is the client to server. 3261 is server to client. And then once that's in play, I can go in, I have the iSCSI qualified name or the IQN deployed, and then once that's in play, I can pull in the information that I need to pull in, which in this case here are these StarWind iSCSI disks. I have a 1 terabyte and I have a 200 gig disk currently associated, and that is for both my both hosts. So this host right here, .52, and the other host, .80, they're both leveraging this. So if I was to add another disk and propagate another, say, 500 gigs, I could give space. I could give hard drive space to all these VMs, and that's basically how that would come into play. Again, we're in the storage video. We're going to walk ourselves through that. The network adapters. Again, we've already discussed this in the previous video, but I have several network adapters. I have 4 of which that are up, and the way that this is going to work is this first VMNIC VMNIC 0 is my management network. So this is how I'm connecting into the host. And then I have another one here. This is my storage. This guy is storage. This guy is management. And then, but this one is on board, right? This is an Ethernet controller that I had to add. And then from there, what I do is, one of the things that I'm planning on leveraging is mapping one of these network adapters to my physical switch, which is a 3750G switch for gigabit. And what I'll end up doing is I have another server that's running Identity Services Engine, which is known as ICE, Cisco's network access control platform. And what I'm planning on doing is taking random PCs, like PC3, mapping its network adapter to a vSwitch that is in the same vSwitch as like VMNIC 5, for instance. And then I'll be able to communicate with the PC to the switch to the ICE server, and then the goal is to test out things like 802.1x and MAB and stuff like that. Those are security topics that I'm studying, but that's the general breakdown to how that will come into play. Advanced settings, I don't have DirectPath I/O set up for USB pass-through, so I'm not even going to bother with that. Power management, not a whole lot going on there. Now that's all the hardware aspects of the host. The next one down here is the software version of it. So if I wanted to go in here and license something, I could. If I have a license that will meet the minimum, meet the CPU requirements, then I'd be able to license it. And during the evaluation period of time, you get access to all of this stuff, 100%, the entire 60 days you've got it. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, it lets you test a lot of things out. Then we have time. So right now I'm not using NTP locally, even though the date and time are off. It's okay, I really don't care. But if I wanted to, I could set up the NTP server, I could start it, and all would be good. My DNS right now, I have pointed to public DNS, and that's pretty much it, because I don't normally tell this host to go communicate with, like if I wanted to take this host right here and try to talk to my domain controller, it would fail. And the reason why it would fail, excuse me, is because my DNS information is wrong. If I wanted to join this host to the physical domain, I'd have to give it the IP address of the domain controller and go from there. Authentication services, if I wanted to join this host to a domain, I'd have to then tell it to go talk to DNS, which is also the domain controller, and it'd be able to communicate with that. There is a way to, if something happens in the network and you need to power up or power down VMs, this is how you would do that. I can come in here and enable manual startup. So let's say, for instance, I lose power. This is a home lab, so it does every once in a while we do lose power. It's very rare, but it does happen. So what I could do is I could say, if this does occur, if I was to go to the Properties tab and say I want to allow virtual machine to start up and start and stop automatically with the system, I could put it into an order and say, okay, if something happens, so I'd have to actually come up here and say move up, automatic startup. I could then edit, how long it waits and stuff like that. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility. I normally don't leverage this capability because in order for a lot of these VMs to boot, actually I should say every VM to boot, that assumes that the Windows 7 PC that is acting as my iSCSI target, that assumes that that iSCSI target software is running and has been reallocated. There's no way that I've been able to find to automate that. So if I had the hard drives locally attached to the host, then it would be no big deal because the storage would already be there. But because the storage is not, I don't bother with this. And then I had the virtual machine swap file. I could change where that gets saved. The security profile. If I wanted to enable SSH to connect to this box through SSH, I could do that through the services. That's going to be the local control plane here. And the firewall, for those of you that have watched any of my videos when it comes to spinning up like router 1, and then I give it a network adapter so I can console into it from the outside. If I don't enable the VM serial port connected over network, if I don't enable that, then I won't be able to do that. So you're basically tunneling telnet over serial to the host, or I'm sorry, to the VM, and that's how you're able to connect to it. And then we have host cache configuration. If you did have SSDs installed, you could leverage this. System resource reservation. I don't have any resource reservations in place. There's a couple of default ones here, but no big deal. Agent VM settings, not even going to touch on that for the moment. And then we have advanced settings. If I wanted to go in here and manipulate anything, this is where you would go do that. The next one here is going to be users. If I wanted to create users, I could do that. So far there's only 3. Root, VPX user, and DCUI. If I wanted to add one, I had to right click inside of here and go add, create a user, and then creating a user doesn't do anything. It just creates a space in the database. If I wanted to allow that user to do anything, I had to go over here to permissions and tell him what he can do. So basically it's role-based access control. So create a user, then map it to some sort of permission. So I could create an R. Riker and then permission of administrator. So I could log in as R. Riker and a password instead of root and whatever the password is. Event-wise, if there's anything going on, this would be where that information would be staged. So I wanted to show you what a physical host looks like compared to a virtual host, which is what this guy does. Again, a lot of this stuff is the same thing, but that's pretty much it. There's really not a whole lot to the actual tabs. If we go back to the file, we have new virtual machine, new resource pool, add permission, etc. If I had a pre-built virtual machine, I could take and take that virtual machine and deploy it, or I could export it as a OVA or an OBF and then redeploy it somewhere else. What I like to refer to as poor man's vMotion. You want to take an already existing VM and deploy it somewhere else. That is one way you could do that. If I wanted to export a VM, I would do it via this. If I wanted to report on something, I could do a host performance report and go from there. Edit wise, client settings are basically what you just what I just showed you earlier in the video, show getting started tabs, etc. And then there's the view, which I am showing you most of this I've already shown you. Inventory, already shown you the inventory. Administration, this would basically take you to where we're at here. Plugins, I don't have any plugins deployed, but we'll be taking a look at plugins down the road with things like vSphere Update Manager. And then help, if you need help, you can go to VMware on the web, you can check for updates, etc. That's pretty much the UI. There's really not a ton to it, but after we take a look at it for a little while, it'll become more and more familiar with you. Beyond that, that's pretty much it, guys. In the next video, we're gonna take a look at setting up the networking. The networking is going to be really, really important, because networking, you won't be able to do anything with the host really unless you set up networking. The only thing we've got is management. I want to set up storage, and I want to walk you guys through, logging in and things like that, and some more of the advanced concept, deploying a virtual machine, and then eventually joining this host to a vCenter implementation, with the assumption that, and I just had to do this with a customer not too long ago, where they had a bunch of VM or ESXi hosts deployed at remote locations, and they needed to be able to control those hosts through vCenter Server. So that's basically was one of my projects, was to make that happen. So it took a little bit of time, but we did get it finished. So that's basically how this would come into play. Beyond that, guys, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.